What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Touchline Talk show. Apologies for not being able to go live this week. After you check out this video, if you want more Champions League coverage, be sure to A, hit that subscribe button, and B, check out the other video I have up breaking down some of the biggest matchups of match day 1 in the Champions League. This video, though, focused on the managerial changes and some other thoughts I wanted to point out again based on these first set of games in the Champions League. Thomas Tuchel out at Chelsea following their loss to Dynamo Zagreb on Tuesday to start their Champions League campaign. It appears that decision was made before that game was not the sort of final straw that broke the camel's back, if you will. And here's the reality of the situation from a Chelsea perspective. The defending had fallen off a cliff last season and especially this season compared to what they were doing when they won the Champions League. Right? That was a lot of the criticism Frank Lampard was getting, is he can't organize this defense. Tuchel came in, immediately got the structure he wanted, smoothed everything out, and they won the Champions League by beating a bunch of teams 1-0, basically. Right? It was not some kind of offensive masterclass. It was just a bunch of fundamentally sound defending. And that fundamentally sound defending is nowhere to be found right now. And the attack was never there during Tuchel's tenure. And so one of the two things had to change. Either you needed to have faith that Tuchel was going to figure out how to reboot this defense, or you needed to make the managerial change, because the offense was never going to happen. And there isn't a lot to, other than the fact that there are new pieces defensively. Kukurea, Koulibaly, Fofana. There just isn't a lot of reason to believe they're going to get back to being the defensive team they used to be. And there's also an argument, even if they do 6 months from now or whatever, or after the World Cup break, you don't have that kind of time if you're Chelsea and things have started this way. So this was not surprising. It's also just kind of in Tuchel's MO, right? He doesn't stay somewhere an extended period of time. He comes in, he's exceptional in the Champions League, which I think is something that gets overlooked. You look at sort of PSG's trajectory before and after him in the Champions League and what he did at Chelsea. This is the one competition he has excelled at. But from a game-to-game standpoint, there's some drama, there's some frustration, and it just wasn't working. They were not playing well. I went on my rant about the attack, and to his credit, Tuchel made changes over the weekend. Still nearly cost him points. Probably should have. Can have a discussion about VAR. I'm not going to get into that here. And then you get shut out against Dynamo Zagreb in the Champions League. And the really interesting part of this for me is so much of the question surrounding this ownership change in Todd Boehly was, what does this era of Chelsea look like? How much money do they have to spend? Are they going to change the way they do things at all? What is the structure going to be? What is Boehly's philosophy going to be? Right? Is Chelsea still going to be one of the 5 most expensive teams in the world in terms of what they do financially and the financial power they have? And the answer appears to be yes. I mean, they threw all kinds of money out there this summer. Completely rebuilt the defense. Aubameyang, Sterling, you can go down the list. It's not like Thomas Tuchel wasn't backed by his new owner. And then Todd Boehly has now gone to the other staple of the Roman Abramovich era, which is firing the manager at the first sign of trouble and just cycling through. Now, maybe this is Boehly was never a huge fan of Tuchel. He was kind of looking for a reason to bring his own person in. Tuchel gave it to him for more reasons than one. And we're not going to see the same pattern of managerial turnover down the line. It's possible. But we're a month into the first season where Boley is calling the shots, and nothing changed in the transfer market, and we've already had a managerial change. That part of this cannot get overlooked. It is fascinating to me, and really something that needs to be highlighted in all of this is, what does this mean for the future of Chelsea and who Chelsea are under Todd Boehly? Because so far the evidence suggests it's not going to look all that different than it did under Roman Abramovich. In terms of a Tuchel replacement, I'm not going to go too deep into this now. Let's actually see what happens. I'll react once they make a hire. But I am in agreement with what seems to be Boehly's thought process, which is Graham Potter is option A. I do not have to think hard about this at all. I've talked about this before and written about this before, that the part of what Graham Potter has done at Brighton that gets overlooked potentially is that he has taken Brighton and turned them into a team that can completely take Manchester United, Newcastle, you go down the list, Leeds, out of their element. Not just play with them, not just beat them, but control a game and take away what these teams want to do and what they do so well. Brighton should not be able to do that. And yet Graham Potter has found a way. And so you look at his style of play and what he has been able to implement at Brighton. And my question with Brighton will forever be, can they continue to put the ball in the back of the net consistently enough? Because that has been their issue, and I've said this before. The chances are always going to be there because they play such an attractive, open brand of soccer. The difference between 2 seasons ago and last season and what's happened so far this season is that they're actually converting enough of these chances to win these games and collect these points. It's getting better and better and better. If all of a sudden Danny Welbeck and Alexis McAllister and Leandro Trossard stop scoring and have a dip in form, Brighton could all very quickly drop to 8th in the Premier League or something. That is always a risk simply because Graham Potter does not have the kind of talent at his disposal he would at Chelsea. And from a Chelsea side of this, you just got done with Tuchel. And one of the defining characteristics of the Tuchel era is his inability to get something even close to optimal performance from his attacking players. The ones he discarded, the ones he continued to play, the ones he left on the bench. From Havertz to Lukaku to Christian Pulisic. Graham Potter is set up to thrive with this kind of attacking talent. You've got some different options. Raheem Sterling can play a couple different positions. You've got Mount, Pulisic, and Havertz, who are kind of these floating number 10-ish guys who can also play on the wing. You've got Aubameyang. And he's also very familiar with Marc Cucurella. You've got Reece James on the other side, who's one of the best outside backs in the Premier League. And then all kinds of different options in the midfield as well. If you want to see what this Chelsea attack can do, and you want to actually sort of double down on all this money you've spent offensively, and try and actually make those players worth their price tags, your first look has to be Graham Potter. We'll see if it ends up happening. We'll see if Graham Potter actually wants to take the job. Because I could argue this is one of those where the grass isn't always greener. Just based on what you are walking into. At the same time, this is a new ownership who is clearly going to back you financially. It is Chelsea. And look at those names you have to work with if you do take this job compared to what he's got at Brighton. No offense to Brighton, they've been brilliant. They've done a terrific job recruiting. It's just a different level when you get to Chelsea. And Graham Potter could look at this and say, I just can't turn this down. We'll see how this all progresses, but I fully expect this to be Graham Potter's job if he wants it. And to me, that is 100% the right decision. Other team that made the managerial change, RB Leipzig. Dominic Tedesco out. They were outscored 8-1 in their last 2 games between the Bundesliga and the Champions League, lost to Shakhtar Donetsk. The numbers will tell you there's no way Shakhtar should have won that game by multiple goals. The eyes tell you something very, very different, which is where expected goals can be deceiving. And I hesitate to put too much stock into them. Because Shakhtar simply cut the Leipzig defense open, and then again, and finished their chances. They were really good, and they were incredibly efficient. Like I said, 8 goals in the last 2 games. 4 apiece. Leipzig have conceded. And I talked about in the other video, AC Milan, or Inter Milan, already having their Champions League in real danger because of the points they just dropped at home against Bayern Munich. RB Leipzig have that, but on a whole different level and on 2 different fronts. This is a Champions League group you 100% should get out of. Real Madrid's going to win it, but you're talking about Shakhtar and Celtic. You can't ask for a better job if you are RB Leipzig. Look at their Champions League group last season. Compare it to this one. And now you are in real danger of not getting out of the group and potentially not even getting to the Europa League. Of course, they've got all kinds of time to fix this. It's not catastrophic. But you can't keep going down this path, because this path you probably finish 4th, maybe 3rd if you're lucky. And then in the Bundesliga, they're already 6 points off of 4th place Union Berlin. And Union Berlin is not going anywhere. So you've got to believe there's at most 1 available Champions League spot. Because Bayern's going to get one, Dortmund's going to get one. And I really think Union Berlin's going to get one. You can't let this spiral. And so, I just have no defense for keeping Tedesco at this point. Now, the bizarre part of this is, and I talked about this in my Bundesliga season preview, I believe. He came in and immediately turned things around. Their only loss between January, when they came back from the Bundesliga winter break, and April 23rd was to Bayern Munich. And then they won the cup. I was really high on this Leipzig team and thought they were going to get back to being the 3rd best team in the Bundesliga. And then you bring in Timo Werner on top of that. There was every reason to believe Tedesco had this team going in the right direction. And it's just all fallen apart in a month. And so they made the decision to move on. I've got nothing to poke in the logic. No holes to poke. It is that bad, and they are in that much trouble this early. If you are going to try and salvage your season, this move needed to be made now. On to a couple other of the Champions League games themselves I wanted to highlight. AC Milan drawing with another Red Bull team, Red Bull Salzburg. Salzburg is one of the most interesting teams in this Champions League to me. Of course, they got out of their group last season. It was a very soft group. This one, much more difficult with Chelsea and AC Milan in it. And as I do my top 25 every week, I've just kept Salzburg somewhere in the 20s because I wanted to give them the benefit of the doubt based on what they did last season. But also, I wasn't entirely convinced they were going to be able to replicate it with the players they lost in the transfer window, which is, of course, something they're very used to. But they looked every bit as dangerous as they did last season in this game. They were really good. Unfortunate to just settle for the draw after going ahead. Milan were decent enough. You're happy if you're Stefano Pioli with that result. This could have gotten real interesting had Salzburg held on for all 3 points the way this group ended up playing out with Chelsea losing. I still think it's AC Milan and Chelsea. This getting a point at home doesn't change that. But again, going back to the Thomas Tuchel conversation, this is not done and dusted that Chelsea are just going to waltz through this group. I'm a big believer in this Salzburg team, and they backed it up. I wanted to see what they were going to do when they finally got good competition, because it's so hard to evaluate them based on what they do domestically. And they showed up in a big way. If it was a different group, I would be much higher on their chances of getting through, because you have two clear favorites, and they didn't win one of their home games against one of those two favorites. So, morally, this is a win for AC Milan, in my opinion. But I wanted to highlight the Red Bull Salzburg performance, because even if they don't get out of this group, I firmly believe they're going to prove to you they're a top 25 team in the world. Maybe not a top 15, top 20 team, but team 22, 23, absolutely believe they are right there and they can play with just about anybody. One of the other things I was really looking forward to about Champions League this season, I know a lot of other people were as well, the return of the Scottish teams. Not off to a great start. Now, in fairness, they did play Real Madrid and Ajax, so it's not fair to expect too much of them. But they did combine to lose 7-0. Celtic falling to Real Madrid 3-0. Ajax getting a 4-0 win over Rangers. And Celtic, to their credit, had a really, really good first half. Nearly went ahead. Were keeping Real Madrid at bay for the most part. You know, Joe Hart had to make some saves here or there, but he wasn't super, super busy. And then it just all fell apart in the second half, because it's Real Madrid playing Celtic, and Real Madrid just kept at it and ultimately walked away with a comfortable 3-goal victory. I talked about Rangers group and how difficult that is going to be to even get to the Europa League. They just got a really, really tough draw. Celtic, on the other hand, still plenty of reason for optimism here. The second spot in that group is wide open, because, again, who knows what's going to happen with RB Leipzig. If I'm Celtic, I'll take my chances against Shakhtar. I'll also take my chances against Leipzig, against Celtic if I'm Shakhtar. But I see those three teams fairly evenly balanced at this point. So even though you lost this one, and you lost it pretty badly, I mean, Real Madrid's going to probably do that to everybody in this group. So at the very least, you are still completely alive for the Europa League. And I still think there is hope for Celtic finishing second. It was a pretty good performance. And I don't think you could ask for much more if you're a Celtic fan. Real Madrid came to town and did what they do in the Champions League. So, Rangers, I think this is going to be more of a honorary sort of celebration of returning to the Champions League. Celtic have every opportunity to at least get themselves back into the Europa League. I don't feel any differently based on this result. I think that's my big takeaway from Celtic's standpoint, is I don't feel any more confident they're going to find a way to finish at least third. But I also don't look at this as reason to say I'm less confident they're going to finish third. We're going to have to see. It's going to come down to these head-to-head games between Celtic, Shakhtar, and RB Leipzig. And right now, I mean, Shakhtar has certainly had the best of the three in match day one, but they also got a horrible RB Leipzig performance. So I'll take my chances if I'm Celtic. No need to get discouraged or, it's the reality of the Champions League. You're going to take some beatings from teams like Real Madrid, but this group is wide open after that, so we'll see what Celtic can do moving forward. And then finally, I also wanted to highlight perhaps the most entertaining game of match day 1, Atletico Madrid end up beating Porto. Mehdi Taremi got a second yellow card for diving that it was debatable, I will say. It was not a clear cut selling for the call, no contact, just went down for no reason. At least from the view I saw and how I interpreted things. I thought he was unlucky to get a second yellow for that. So Porto are down to 10 men. Mario Hermoso scores in stoppage time to put Atletico Madrid ahead. He then whacks the ball with his hand inside the box to give Porto a penalty, which they convert to make it 1-1. And then Antoine Griezmann scores with essentially the last kick of the game, although it was not a kick he scored with, but you get the point. Scores at the death. Again, all of this happened in stoppage time. I think Taremi's red card was minute 82 or 83, somewhere in there. So you had 3 goals in stoppage time. You went from an Atleti win to a draw to an Atleti win. And Diego Simeone goes flying down the sidelines to go hug Antoine Griezmann, who he won't play entire games because he doesn't want to trigger the option to buy with Barcelona and all that. It's a very bizarre situation that was unfolding. It was not a spectacular Atletico Madrid performance. This happened sometimes in the Champions League. Right? Very rarely are they excellent through the group stage. They just kind of do enough to get by. And then whoever gets drawn with them in the round of 16 just wants no part of having to deal with this team. They are at their best in those 2-leg ties, not necessarily in a 6-game competition like this, a round-robin format. But they get the 3 points and are in excellent position to control this group from start to finish the way they should. I do want to talk about this from Porto's standpoint for a second. Again, this is your most difficult game on the schedule. No need to be worried whatsoever. But boy, they had an opportunity to put themselves in really good position. You equalized down a man on the road against Atletico Madrid in stoppage time. In a group that has Club Brugge and Bayer Leverkusen. Porto is still the second best team in this group and should go through. But you could have gotten a point, again, your most difficult game, could have walked away with a point and really been in a position to not only get out of the group, but potentially win it. If you take care of business in your 4 games against Bruges and Leverkusen and find a way to beat Atletico Madrid at home. Or at least you get a draw out of that one and hope maybe Atletico drops points somewhere else. Now you're more playing for second place. Yes, it's still possible. You run the table, beat Atletico Madrid at home, and then we're having a different discussion. But I just don't see Porto doing that. So you are really disappointed just because of... It's one of those things where right on the... And soccer is so weird this way sometimes. On the whole, you got to be pleased with the performance, happy with what you saw, not concerned at all. If you say you go into stoppage time and ultimately come up short, you're okay with that if you're Porto. But then there's the part of it where you're 5 minutes or so from taking a point at the Metropolitano. And so the way the game unfolded leaves you incredibly disappointed, even though if you ask somebody if they'll take this result at the beginning, of course you would prefer to get points out of it, but nobody's concerned that you lost this game. It's one of those weird things that happens in this sport. It was a incredible ending that may not be replicated in the Champions League this year with all the stuff that happened during stoppage time. It was the game where nobody had scored, and then all of a sudden, all the drama happens, but Atletico Madrid walk away with the win and are in prime position to top that group. Still like Porto's chances to get through as the second team. That is all for segment 2 of Champions League reaction. Again, like I said, be sure to go check out the other video for thoughts on the marquee games Inter losing to Bayern, Juventus, PSG, as well as Liverpool getting obliterated by Napoli. I cover all that in the other video. Be sure to hit that subscribe button so you can see all of the new videos that come out on the Touchline Talk YouTube channel. We'll see you next time.